Hey guys, my name is Cassidy and you're watching That Spooky Lifestyle, where we bring the ooky, the spooky, the creepy and the crawly into our everyday lives. Today we're going to be diving into the supernatural world of Ed and Lorraine Warren. We're going to be talking about where they started and how they became the famous paranormal investigators we know them as today. But before we dive in, let's take a quick look at what we talked about last week, about the infamous Ouija board. When you look at your own Ouija board that you've invested in, you should want to work with it. You can move on to more complicated questions. What year did you die? When did you die? How did you die? If you're doing this in somewhere, especially like a graveyard, it might feel just overwhelming in general. So now we're gonna jump into some of the more popular rules that are circulating about the ghoulish. I will leave the video linked up top. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely go and check it out. And now let's jump right in. Ed and Lorraine Warren actually grew up in the same town of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Now, when researching different websites and, blogs, whatever, called it a town, but the population back then was 142,000, like in there. And from someone who's actually grown up in a small town of 500 people, like, Bridgeport, Connecticut was not a town to people who've actually grown up in a small town, but I digress. They were also both raised with very strong Catholic beliefs, and both had supernatural experiences before they even met each other. Ed Warren was born in 1926, and his first supernatural experience actually happened in his own childhood home. While Ed was growing up, he would hear weird noises coming from his closet, and when he went to investigate those noises, he came across this weird kind of glowing orb. This happened a few times where he'd hear the noises, go to investigate and see this orb. He came across it a few times, and then the more he saw it, the more it started to kind of morph into these really horrific, scary faces. Ed would later say that the one that bothered him the most was this face of a really haggard old lady. He said she had a very thin face, very long, kind of like, emancipated a little bit, and had these really dark, deep eyes. And I think it's one of those things, once you see that face, it's like stuck in your head. You see it once and then you go do something else, you're still thinking about it because it just disturbed you that much. That's really the vibe I got when researching this. Lorraine was born in 1927, so she was 1 year younger than Ed. Now, Lorraine's initial paranormal experiences sound like they're less terrifying, but I'm sure she saw some really crazy things and had some really crazy experiences of her own, because she realized from a very young age that she was a clairvoyant. So a clairvoyant is basically defined as someone who can see beyond the mortal realm. Sometimes this means you can see spirits, other times this means you can see the future. That's kind of the rough gist of what a clairvoyant is. So when you say it like that, it does sound like, oh, she, had a way less terrifying experience than Ed. But when you're seeing things like that at such a young age, I'm sure it was like a crazy experience for her as well. Lorraine would later state that while she was at her childhood Catholic school, she started to see glowing lights around the different nuns that were there. There was one nun in particular whose light shone much brighter than that of Mother Superior's, and at this time it kind of got her young brain thinking, what am I seeing? What's going on here? And this is when she started to realize that she could see people's auras. The more she came to understand her gifts and her powers, the better she was able to use them, but she still states in an interview that she genuinely hopes no one else has to see ghosts like she did. I think she had some pretty you know, scary situations, especially if you're not quite sure what's going on or what you're looking at. It would be pretty spooky, I think. Lorraine has used her abilities in almost every case the Warrens investigated. It just kind of helped give her an intuitive read or feel of the situation they were walking into. Especially at this time, there was no standard procedures by the book way to walk into these kind of situations. You know, everything that they investigated was very much its own unique situation. Backtracking to before they were investigators, Ed and Lorraine officially met when they were 16. Ed was an usher at the Colonial Theater, and Lorraine often went there with her mother, and so they just started talking, got to know each other, and eventually started dating. Lorraine later mentions that her gifts told her that Ed would be the one that she marries, and they were right. So Ed and Lorraine Warren got married in 1945 when Ed was on leave from World War II, but the celebrations didn't last long because he was called back overseas not long after, and he had to leave a pregnant Lorraine behind. Their daughter Judy was born while Ed was away overseas in World War II, which is crazy to think about because you think the world wars were so long ago, but they really weren't. Like, they really weren't. Once Ed was officially back from the war, he actually enrolled in art school. His passion was painting, but he soon became frustrated with the teachers and instructors that he had. He really felt like they weren't showing him any new techniques, and he didn't feel challenged enough. He really felt like he was just sitting in a classroom learning things he already knew, so he did drop out of this art school. It just wasn't for him. The crazy thing is he was actually quite a good painter too. Like, he really didn't need art school, but I do understand that kind of, you know, wanting to learn more, wanting to learn new things, and then it would be very frustrating if your instructors were just covering the basics or, you know, things you already knew. It would feel like a waste of time. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are we talking about painting? Let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to the ghost, to the spooky. Let's get into it. Well, we're about to. When Ed and Lorraine first started on their paranormal journey, they started out with Ed painting these different haunted locations. Like I said, Ed was actually quite a good painter, so these were actually works of art that he was doing. So how they would do this is Ed would paint these houses that were rumored to be haunted, but what he would do is add the ghosts in. He would add in, you know, a dark figure in the window or on the deck, kind of where they were feeling the negative energy was. And then he would send sweet little Lorraine up to the house with the painting to talk to the owners about it. It was kind of like a peace offering, help the owners let down their guard and realize that they weren't just trying to make fun of them. They were really there to learn more about the location and the issues the owners were having, because even today, like, haunting stuff like that is still very almost taboo in a way where, like, you don't want to be the person to have those problems or to talk about it. And if you were having those problems, you wouldn't be telling any random stranger you came across, right? Especially this is your own personal home, you don't know these strangers, you know. It was a really good way to kind of help the owners get comfortable with Ed and Lorraine Warren, especially when they were starting out and, like, ghost hunting and all that was not a thing. So Lorraine would walk up to the house with these paintings and talk to the owners and basically explain what Ed and Lorraine do, and they talk about the house and the painting, and they would actually gift these paintings to the owners. And this usually led to the owners letting them in, taking them through the house, and talking about the weird things that were going on. These paintings were just a really great way to break the ice at the start, to kind of get the conversation started. So as our dynamic duo started to pick up speed and do these investigations more often, they really started to settle into their own roles. Ed turned into their demonologist, basically researching anything he could about demons and spirits, and he even took part in exorcisms when they needed to perform them. An interesting fact I came across is that Ed Warren is one of the only people to be recognized as a self-proclaimed demonologist by the Catholic Church, which I thought was interesting. Especially if you look more into exorcisms and priests that do them and things like that. Not any Tom, Dick, or Harry can walk off the street and do an exorcism. And even priests and, self-proclaimed demonologists who can perform exorcisms don't just get to do them whenever they think needs to happen. It does have to be a request, and I think you have to go to get permission from a bishop. I'd have to look into that again, but there is, not just anyone can do it whenever they want to. Lorraine, on the other hand, was more their intuitive, psychic, reading, clairvoyant person of the team, and she would use her psychic abilities during these investigations. It's said that she would go into this trance-like state where she could see the dead and talk to the dead, really kind of going into another realm. The more investigations that Ed and Lorraine did, the more this sort of paranormal hobby really started to shift into something more serious. This is when they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952, and it is the oldest ghost hunting, ghost investigation group in New England. This society actually does have a Facebook page, and I will link it below in case after this video you want to check it out. So they went from haunted house paintings and really just casually talking about spirits and haunted locations into being a bit more proactive about investigations, getting a bit more serious, and then in 1965 they upped their game again and really focused on removing, demons, evil spirits from locations and people. That's really when they started to narrow their focus down on specifically that. Apparently their MO changed from investigation to eviction after they met the ghost of a young girl named Cynthia. This ghost was a lost little girl looking for her mother, and I think it was really just one of those things that it really stuck with them and really helped put them on the path of we want to help good spirits cross over and remove, spirits where they shouldn't be, basically. Over the years, the Warrens have investigated over 10,000 cases and have inspired a lot of the horror movies that we know and love today. During these investigations, they did start to collect a bunch of haunted items. These haunted items usually came from the cases that they worked on or the locations they were investigating, and they started to create their own haunted museum of paranormal artifacts. This collection later became known as the Warrens Occult Museum. Their collection included things like vampire coffins, satanic tools, death curses, demon masks, and psychic photographs, just to name a few. However, the most prominent items that you will find in their collection are haunted dolls, with their main leader, we all know, being the very famous Raggedy Ann Annabelle doll. Now, I want to be very clear, we will not be talking about their famous cases today because we all know each case needs its own spotlight and its own video to really get the goods on it. Needless to say, they've had many high-profile cases, such as the Amityville haunting, that helped boost their fame and really got their name out there. However, the Warrens not only investigated cases, they also put on lectures to talk about the different experiences they've had, and again, this also helped get their name out there and what they were doing. Then came the Conjuring series, and I think we know the rest is history. Unfortunately, neither one of the Warrens are with us anymore. Ed Warren passed away in 2006 at the age of 79, and Lorraine actually stated that she received signs from Ed after he passed away. She said in certain instances she could feel his presence grabbing her hand, as well as there was mysterious whistling at a restaurant where she was celebrating Ed's birthday after he passed. So that kind of hits me right in the feels, like he's trying to hold her hand, you know, letting her know that he's there and with her. I think that's a really cute kind of story and thing. It hits me right in the feels. Lorraine passed away in her sleep on April 18th, 2019 at the age of 92. Their daughter Judy is still alive, as well as Judy's son Tony, who currently is in charge of the Occult Museum, and I believe he is also the admin of the New England Society for Psychic Research, their Facebook page. I believe he also is in charge of that, as well as he has his own website, which I will also be linking below. That's all the information I have for you guys today, but I thought we could take a quick sneak peek at the next Ed and Lorraine Get Ready With Me that I have lined up for us. Visions even depicted the old man as appearing as this very large demonic beast. Not shockingly, David started to have night terrors, and unexplained bruising and scratching started showing up all over his body. The church didn't actually update their exorcism rules until 1999. At this point, Arn Johnson's whole demeanor changed and he started to growl like a dog. An unusual story, and I'm excited to talk more about it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't lose me in the social media void. Definitely hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on the next Get Ready With Me video. Follow me on Instagram if you enjoy witchy content. Follow me on Facebook if you enjoy Halloween memes. I share a lot of those over there. I'll have everything linked below, and thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I will see you in my next video.